Should the Mail on Sunday have published their front-page story in which the husband of Jo Cox, the murdered Labour MP, was accused of sexually inappropriate behaviour? Even if the story is true, haven't Brendan Cox and his 2 young children suffered enough? Was it really in the public interest for the paper to tell the world the man had left his senior job at Save the Children back in 2015 because of these accusations? Of course, no one should behave inappropriately. But if his wife hadn't been a murdered MP and the Oxfam story hadn't been in the headlines, the story of Brendan Cox wouldn't have warranted more than a couple of paragraphs in a local paper. Instead, it dominated the news. This was a completely unnecessary story for the paper to run.
OK, there's a couple of simple truths here. Sex abuse is always wrong. Abuse of power is always wrong. Of course, this story should have been reported in light of the current charity sex scandals and the cover-ups that have gone with that. Brendan Cox suffered the most horrific tragedy imaginable. I get that. I get that his children should never have had to suffer what happened to their mum. However, he cannot be given a free pass on allegations of sex abuse because no one else has. And what has upset me this week is the voices, very high-profile female voices that, when the scandal at Westminster was happening, were shouting for the heads of MPs who might have grazed the knee of a woman that they knew. The same people were shouting for the heads of rich men at the President's Club dinner for allegedly abusing women. And here you seem to be saying that Brendan Cox should have a free pass because of what tragically happened to his wife. I have no doubt whatsoever that Brendan Cox is a fantastic father. No doubt whatsoever. But, you know, no one is talking about the victims of his alleged offences in this. We're talking about how he should be left alone. Let's just hear Jess Phillips, who was very vociferous about abuse elsewhere.
What Brendan has done this morning and the statements that have been released over the weekend show that he's willing to face the things that he may have done, or that certainly how they've made people feel. And what he, I'm sure, never wanted to do was to drag any of the work that those of us who wish to carry on the work of Jo through any sort of controversy. That,
to me, I have huge respect for Jess Phillips, but that, for me, is rank hypocrisy, because I heard her talking about other alleged sex abusers, and here she's saying that because of what happened to him, because he's a good and decent man, we shouldn't be talking about this. Of course we should. It's part of a very big scandal currently.
But he's only on the front page of the Mail on Sunday. No, listen. Well, no, you haven't listened to what I said. You can't say
what you're going to say.
Well, if you know what I'm going to say, we shouldn't have a debate show.
You said it in the intro.
No, what I'm saying is it was only because it was on the front page of the Mail on Sunday that it then dominated the news for 24 hours at least. It was the lead story on the BBC. Who wouldn't have run the story if it had been theirs?
Why do you think it shouldn't have been in the light of everything that's happening with
because
charities?
I think when you're an editor of a programme or you're an editor of a newspaper, you make judgments, and sometimes you say, this person has suffered enough.
What about the victims I want to come back. What about the victims in this alleged offences that Brendan Cox found? No one is. If I was one of those, his so-called alleged victims, I would be incandescent with rage that everyone is talking about what a great guy he is, and no one's talking about what he is allegedly done to them.
I'm so pleased, Carol, that you have finally found compassion for the victims, because I've had at least 2 debates with you on this show where I've been saying exactly what you've been saying, and by the way, I completely agree with you on this. I've been saying exactly what you've been saying, that this is completely unacceptable. We need to have zero tolerance to sexual abuse and harassment, that we should be talking about the victims instead of these poor men in positions of power.
I don't think I've ever said poor men in power should be allowed to abuse women athletes.
About the President's Club, you were, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'll disagree, very dismissive of the women in the President's Club and the experiences they'd had.
The women in the President's Club knew what they were getting into.
And when we talk
about the women who were working for Save the Children that Brendan Cox allegedly abused did not ask for that to happen.
If that means you are now on side of someone with zero tolerance to sexual abuse,
well, that's just being sarcastic and silly.
I'm genuinely happy that you've come on board. I agree with you. I think that to hear Jess Phillips, who was very strong and unequivocal in her condemnation of other men in power, to be to be so forgiving of Brendan Cox, for me that is hypocrisy. And I'm really disappointed by people on the left for having a double standard. I disagree with you, Greg. I think that the reason that Brendan Cox deserves a higher level of scrutiny is not because he's a grieving widower, and we all had such compassion for that. It's because he's in a position of power. He's been chairing 2 charities in her name. People have been giving money. If you want to accept that kind of responsibility, you need to accept you come under a high level of scrutiny.
I think we need to just see what his response has been, to be fair to him. So this is what Brendan Cox says in response to the allegations. He says that I do acknowledge and understand that during my time at Save the Children, I made mistakes and behaved in a way that caused some women hurt and offence. This was never malicious, but it was certainly inappropriate. In the past, I focused on disputing what I felt was untrue in the allegations, but I realise now that it's more important to take full responsibility for what I have done. I'm committed to holding myself to much higher standards of personal conduct in the future. I think that one of the things I'm tired of, and actually, to be fair, I think the only one who's spoken so far, Michelle's yet to speak on this topic, but I think Afua has been consistent here in condemning sexual abuse and harassment from all sides of the political spectrum. And I'm going to try and be consistent as well, but come down on a slightly different side to you on this debate and say, I have consistently said that there's a line that the newspapers, I believe, have crossed between treating sexual harassment seriously and between trying to spin this whole thing to turn a profit. And I think that line was crossed with the President's Club, and I think it's crossed with Brendan Cox, because I think they're overstating all of this stuff just because they know that currently it's the go-to story in the news, and they want to sell newspapers.
That's how newspapers work.
Michelle,
I'm
tired of it being used, sexual harassment being used as a political football, because Toby Young was treated to the same thing by the left.
It's a relevant story.
Michelle.
Well, I think that the paper was right to do this story, and the reason why, so you said you felt it wasn't in the public interest. The reason that I feel it is in the public interest is because Brendan Cox is a person who's chosen to take a platform and to use, and again, I feel like I need to reiterate, of course, I've got sympathy for what happened, it's very tragic, but what he took off the back of that was to create a platform for himself and to use that platform to tell a lot of people how they should be conducting themselves. Now, I have no problem with that. You can tell people how to conduct yourself all you want, but if you're going to do that, you should be making sure that you are also conducting yourself in a good way. Now, what I would say is, when there are allegations that perhaps somebody hasn't been, you deserve to know that. That to me, is in the public interest.
Yeah. Well, it would be quite interesting to ask male group newspapers, for instance, but let's just take the one. They ran this story. So it'd be interesting to ask most organisations, how many allegations of sexual harassment have they had in their organisations?
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. The subject has been weaponised. Now, we're talking about the Mail at the moment with Brendan Cox, but likewise, when this happened to Toby Young, it was the left-wing press. Yeah. And frankly, I do remember...
And he wasn't accused of abuse.
But Carol, Af was right. I do remember when we discussed the President's Club, you were saying that the Financial Times has just run with this story.
I really resent you two trying to say that I think it's okay to abuse women. I don't, and I have never said anything close to that.
And I haven't suggested you've said that either. What I'm saying is I believe the subject is being weaponised politically, and that's what I find disgusting. This subject should be treated with a cross-party, non-partisan approach, and it's a serious subject. Unfortunately, people on the left want to use it to...
what you're saying, Majid. You're saying it's a serious subject, with which I agree.
And I've said you're the only one that I've heard is consistent on it.
Thank you. But I don't understand why you're saying that newspapers are kind of exploiting it. It's an important story. We've had, in my lifetime, this has been normalised. I've worked in the international development sector. I have experienced sexual abuse in the international sector, and I've seen it being completely dismissed, pushed to the side, covered up. And so for me, it is high time people are held to a normal standard of accountability. And that's the newspapers are inappropriate.
Can somebody else talk on this? We keep on being told that he has apologised to these women. What I read in the Sunday paper was that he apologised, but then he said, my recollection of what I did was not their recollection of what I did. And having already said that a lot of these so-called abuses were carried out when he'd had a drink, how can he say that? So he's apologised on the one hand to his victims, on the other hand he's taking it back and saying they're exaggerating.
To be fair to him, he's saying that he's recognised that's wrong now. He's saying in the past I focused on disputing what I felt was untrue in the allegations, but I realise now it's more important to take full responsibility.
And this is a wider issue. Can I just bring in Yvette Cooper, who I think rightly said that this is a bigger problem than Brendan Cox?
There's a wider issue here that I think hopefully we are seeing a change now in the climate and in culture where people are recognising that, you know, those in positions of power should not abuse positions of power. Those who end up becoming the victims of harassment should have support to speak out, and there should be systems in place that allow this to be dealt with and sorted out and not allow things to just drag on and continue to cause real problems.
And that's the kind of message that I would like to come out of this, that we could actually see change, because this is about women at the end of the day who've experienced abuse and harassment.
We are going to see change, don't you think?
I hope so.
As a result of what has gone on, we are going to see change. I was just making
I
the point of somebody who I think has suffered.
The whole
greatly.
topic will be destroyed if we weaponise it and politicise it.
I agree.